Hi, it's Colleen Schmidt from Divination Counseling Service, here today to present the full moon chart of July 23rd, 2021. And with that said, we are going to be using Washington, D.C., though I will be looking at the Sun axis and the Aries axis, which really wouldn't matter what chart you were looking at. So before we begin looking at this rather interesting chart, I do want to point out that new moons and full moons are very different in their makeup. That a full moon is more about the reflection of, so it can be more enlightening, whereas new moons can often mark beginnings of new cycles. Full moons are about what we've discovered through those new moons. Okay? Before I begin, as always, thank you for watching this video. And I also want to thank all of my followers. And if you are not a subscriber, please think about becoming one. And if you would, please like, share, and in particular, comment. I would love to hear from you. So with that said, we're going to be looking at this chart. I'm going to look at it as always through Janus first, where we're going to do a good examination of the chart with regards to the angles of the chart. I'm going to then jump with those angles. I'm going to go to solar fire rather quickly today because I do want to look at the sun moon axis, which they are in opposition. So on the dial, they would be in the same point. But I also want to talk about the Aries point because this is a really interesting chart. And actually, before I go to the chart, I do want to point out that this chart has a Pisces rising for Washington, D.C., which does make it a Neptune ruled chart. Neptune, ironically, is sitting right at the ascendant. Now, what is this saying? Well, it will depend on who it's saying it about. Could this be a period of enlightenment, or could this be a period of disillusion and even disappointment? We'll look at it, okay? The other thing I'm going to be doing with this chart, which I haven't done for a little while, but boy, when I got into this chart and started working on it, it all but begged me to do this, is I actually went out and into my asteroid list, and I'll wait for the dial for this, but I actually did, I'm going to say 8 different virus asteroids, Aphecina, Peter Piot, Fracastor, Avansky, I can't even say these, some of them, Stanley, Monroe, Ley, and Thucydides, which I've already talked about because at that time when I was doing it, that happened to be sitting right at the Aries point. Ironically, that is completely within minutes squaring the ascendant and conjuncting the IC. So we'll talk about it because it is an important virus asteroid as we go into the full moon. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the vaccination, Francis, Jenner, and Pasteur, as ways to see what exactly is going on. Because as we begin to look at this chart, it is going to jump off the page. It is Washington, D.C. And apparently Washington, D.C., which even as of today's date, this probably will not be going out until the 23rd. Today happens to be the 20th. And we already know that these things begin before their actual dates. And I can already tell you that Washington is abuzz with the concept of what is happening with these vaccinations and what's keeping us from reaching herd immunity, which if you would think that enough people would get vaccinated, we could do that. Unfortunately, that's not what's happening. And we may have a Neptune to explain why it's not happening. So just remember what Neptune means. It's also illness, but it's also disinformation. And remember that Poseidon that I've been talking about for months, literally, well, at least, yeah, I think it is a couple months, is really riding down there along that Aries point, down at the 15 fixed area. And I think that it's really affecting what people hear or what it is they're listening to. So let's jump in and look at these charts. It gives you a little bit of an idea of what we're going to be doing today. And hopefully you will find it of interest. So let's go in there and check out just what does Janus look like. So we'll start with Janus first. And I'm back and we're in the chart. And there's not let me get rid of last time I worked, I put in all these midpoints and now I'm seeing that they're still here. So I'm just going to remove them for this particular video. Okay. Yeah, we're going to keep that. And for those of you who want to get familiar with this program, maybe that was a good lesson, even me getting rid of them. So here we are. It looks a little bit different now. And we're looking at, here we go, our Neptune chart, okay? So at 20 degrees 17, we have an ascendant. So I'm back. I had to wait till the dog was done barking. Not my dog. I'm a cat person myself. I love dogs, don't get me wrong, but they're loud. And apparently now that I've moved to the center of the house, I'm not contending with traffic, but I have this now. So nice dogs, just bark a lot. Anyway, so getting back into this, we have this 20-degree Pisces ascendant, and the chart itself is ruled by Neptune. Neptune happens to fall within, here we go, 3 degrees of that ascendant, so it is very much a part of that ascendant. And you really want to look at this because Neptune is the planet of disillusion, illusion, compassion, but you can also, depending on what's going on, you can also ferret out, or the truth does come, but then often it's disappointing. And so and it's retrograde, which is one of the reasons why I'm wondering if some of it won't be enlightenment. Now, enlightenment doesn't happen always on the external. Enlightenment is always those aha moments that are internal. And Neptune can be related to those moments as well. Okay? So the chart is interesting because the fact is that you've got Mercury in conjunct. Look at that. Okay, you see that brown? It's an in conjunct. That's the sign. And so it's really about looking at social status or is it the status of Neptune? Okay, because it makes one wonder, where we are in all of this. But Mercury is about news, and it kind of in a way is disconcerting because we might be having news that it can cause enlightenment, but it can also cause disappointment, and it can also be an issue for our future. And I did want to look at that. Now, Cupido up there with that retrograde is in range. It is an out of sign. You can see that, but it is within that 10 degrees. So the word used here is parans. Parans, I'm not even sure if I'm saying it correctly, but it is in parans, which means that there is an aspect here, which means that 2 degrees of Capricorn is also then in aspect to the 22 degrees of Pisces. Okay? And with that said, you have to look at, and this is an interesting concept in light of what it is, because it's almost like your association is going to determine how you handle the news and whether it's enlightening or disappointing. Okay, so it could be a little of each. It means everything in astrology means everything that it can. So that's right there. There's some real activity going on. The 2 degrees of Cap again, not far from the Aries point. And I'll get to that later, but you're really looking at here. This is also not far from the Aries point. So we're talking about midpoints again. And those of you who saw my midpoint video might have a little bit more of an understanding of what I'm referring to. If something is close enough to that point, there could be something that hits it from somewhere else, and that will bring it right into the aspect, because into the axis itself. And we'll get to that later. But I wanted to really look first at the chart, and I wanted to look at to this dynamic. Now, one of the things that I do enjoy about looking at the Janus is that these are easier to see. Okay, it's really hard to see because there's just so much stuff working in the solar fire. But here, look at the way this sun. Okay, now it has a trine. Notice how I say that. It has a trine, but it has all of these oppositions, and it has an inconjunct. And let me just say something about the inconjunct. It has a way of, and it is with Jupiter. So you would think, but Jupiter's retrograde. And you would say to yourself, but Jupiter is a beneficial planet. Sure, it is, unless you consider overindulgence or overdoing it or any of the other overs that Jupiter can relate to. You know, we have a saying, and it relates to trines. And I want to point this out because the trine is to Neptune. And it makes me wonder, because when something trines, we say, well, then Neptune is actually in good aspect to the sun. No, it's not. Because Neptune in aspect to anything leaves you open, particularly the sun, to being disillusioned, to being misled. And in particular, self-delusion is a huge concept when you're referring to Neptune. So is Neptune good? With this Neptune and this Jupiter? Jupiter means that the sun could go overboard, that there are days where there's overreach, okay? Now, I want you to keep this all in mind, on a daily level, but remember now I'm reading Washington, D.C.'s chart. And I'm reading concerns about something that we've expanded and maybe we've deluded ourselves, okay? And that doesn't necessarily have to be just true with the virus. It's just that when I started seeing things like this, I went into whole virus mode with my research because I thought it was valuable information that I should put out there. But I do want us to consider this on a personal level if you happen to live in the DC area, that you could be under some delusion. Your ability to express yourself, okay, could be affected by something that is more or less unknown. 12th house. Neptune, illusions, disillusions, but also illness is playing into that real big. And whatever the news is that we're getting, here we go, okay? Which, by the way, is in trine. Again, when one thing says it, the other one lies. It reminds me of what goes on in the, I don't want to get political, but with the GOPs right now. Let's go along with the lie. Let's go along with the big lie. We know it's a lie, but we're going to go along with it anyway. Well, that's a trine, people. That's what trines are. It's just easy to go along with what's already in play, even if you know that whatever is in play is not good. This could be happening to us on personal levels. What is it that we're accepting? What delusions are we telling ourselves on a daily basis? Because, of course, it's the sun. About our ability to express ourselves. So hold that thought. I'm going to jump because the rest of it, I didn't do a whole lot of prep work on Janus. I have to admit that, because once I saw Neptune and then I saw the dynamics of what that sun was under, I completely jumped to asteroids because that's what I do as an asteroid astrologer. I want to know details. I want to know what the heck else is showing up on these angles. So with that said, let's do just that. Let's jump in here, okay, and let's see it. Okay, so first I do want to point out that the difference between the programs is 1 minute. Not on the sun-moon axis, but for some reason on the ascendant. And I'm not even trying to figure out why that is. I'm just leaving it. But the solar fire features the same, okay? So you still see Neptune there. You still have Cupido up here, okay? So I'm just showing you where everything is because now we've really put a lot into this chart and we have a lot to talk about. I wanted to talk about the fact that this 15-degree Piscean Calypso, and Calypso is talking about what's hidden, what we don't know. And it's coming from, oh, this is no surprise, the 12th house where Jupiter sits, where there's something going on that we don't know about. Something's expanding, unseen. There's that virus again. Now you understand why I just felt it was so important for me to look at this chart from the dynamics of this particular issue. Okay. And what does that mean? Well, one of the things that I saw over here, which again, no surprise, because there's a lot over here that is involved in this descendant right here. Okay. And I can tell you that Atlantis and Apollo, there's a sense of gloom and doom because things are going so slowly, because here we go again. Some lessons we have to learn more than once, apparently. And it's interesting because they are now calling this the fourth wave. Okay. So I really love seeing this in astrology, though I'm not happy about it. It's surprise because some people really have felt they've done the right thing. And in getting vaccinated, in being socially aware and socially distanced. And by the way, I really want to stress that because I am a very pro-vaccination person in this particular situation for the simple fact that children cannot be vaccinated and there just isn't one for them. And every person out there who is not vaccinated is putting children at risk. And they could say, well, children don't get that sick. Yeah, they do. And we don't know that there won't be some degree of permanent damage either. And I think it's, again, this is just my personal opinion, but I think it's irresponsible to think that you could do whatever you want. It's your right. That's just irresponsible. That is, in my opinion, irresponsible. Because this isn't just about you. And you know, I really want to show this because that's the dynamics between the fifth house sun. It's me, and the moon. It's all people. All people. And that's who we should be thinking about. I think it's humanitarian to think in terms of people outside of yourself. And so that's why I'm a very pro vaccination person. So entertainment purposes, I'm not telling anyone to do anything. I never do. There are people I know that are not vaccinated, but I do really have a very strong feeling about how much I will socialize with those who are not vaccinated because I don't want to be responsible if something were to happen to them. And even though my daughter has pointed out, hey, it was their decision, I still feel that my reason for getting vaccinated was for everybody. And I had to bring that up. So when you're looking at this, I want you to look at two things here. I want you to look at the moon and its relationship to that retrograde Pluto and how that those two, it is, in a literal term, it's the transformation of the people. We are changing. This virus is changing us. It was supposed to do that. That's what it was predicted to do. It's going to change our culture in ways that we won't see until hindsight, which is always 2020. And it's really interesting because that's also in the chart, okay? That Pluto in the mix. That's why it's so interesting. We're going to go back to normal. No, there is no normal anymore. We passed over that when we changed age at the end of December. And now, as we move forward in time, it's always going to be about the Pluto for a while. It's going to be about transformation and how, as a whole, Moon, the people, are transforming because they're connected. Okay, so let me go back to my notes. I have a lot of notes that I wanted to go through with you. So as a person who saw that Apollo and that Atlantis and that Neptune and that Calypso, unknown information that can be extremely deceptive, and the gloom and doom, the slowness, will we ever be able to really reopen if people don't get vaccinated? That's a real question, and that's a question in this chart. Now, you could take that on a personal level. Are there things going on in your life that you're just not sure of because not all the information is there? And because you don't have all the information, there's a sense of gloom and doom. Or here's another one that also plays into both the virus and not, is that concept of privacy issues, the invasion of our privacy. Well, what came out in the news in the last 24 hours, I believe it was, is that there is a such thing as a Pegasus application that comes out of Israel that spies on people. And you don't have to do anything wrong to have it get you. Okay. And we're going to be finding out more about that. I know we are, because of the chart. So here's two political issues going on in Washington, D.C. at this moment in time that this chart is clearly talking about. So something to look out for. Okay. So I moved on with this, and let me get my first page of notes because this was the first stuff I really want to talk about. The other thing that I wanted to talk about in Parans, and now that we're getting into the asteroids, we have, I talked about Neptune, I talked about Apollo, and I talked about Atlantis. But one of the things that I really want to talk about is it talks about photography is also here. See that at 27 degrees right there is photographer. And you know what? Let me get my pen. So I'm back. And what we're looking at here is right here. Okay. So that's photographer. That's an asteroid. And it talks about photography or pictures. Okay. So the first thing we think of is photography. And it talks about how photos remind us that some people are really slow to get it. So we're going to see some pictures, whether it be like in our mind or things that stick with us as we see it. We'll say, oh, like we're affected by it. So it's like a in the mind type thing. Astrea is also up here right on the midheaven, and it too talks about what we see. Okay. Now, Astrea is also telling us this will not be resolved. Not yet. Not at this month. Okay. So, and it hasn't been resolved. And I think that's the other thing that we need to look at. We're all opening up in America here. Oh, we think everything is done and over. No, it is not. And this chart reminds us it is not. And why do we know it's not? Because of what we're seeing. That's how we know. Okay. So here we realize that people are very slow to get what's going on here. That's how I feel too. Okay. I feel like, wow, if you're not vaccinated, do you really know what's going on? And a lot of times they don't. And they've been in some cases, not all, they've been listening to a lot of misinformation. In other cases, I've met people who, I'm sorry, no other word for it, are just being selfish. And, so whatever category you fall in doesn't matter, because all of this brings about a sense of gloom and doom for everybody. But there's also this concept of privacy concerns. And what I think is interesting is one of the things that people are talking about with the virus or the vaccination, is they're putting nanos in our body. And they're worried that they're going to be following us. My God, they've got Pegasus. They've got our cell phones. Do they really need to put it into a vaccination? No, they don't. They have plenty of information on all of us that have cell phones. So you see what I'm saying? Come on, guys. Really, they want to get you. They got you. That's just the way it is. I don't think they need a vaccination. But in any event, I think that people are also surprised by what they're seeing and what they'll ultimately be dealing with. And I think one of the biggest surprises is this concept of Pegasus and how far reaching that particular application has been used. We're going to be finding out more, so I'm not going to go into it more here. Again, it's a hotbed political issue that I think is going to be really coming out, and we're going to find out that the former guy really, really abused his privileges in his office. So that is definitely part of it. So that's a huge factor that also jumped out at me. And it was because of all of this that I said to myself, you know what, Colleen, you got to spend some time on this particular video. You've got to talk about the asteroids that relate to the viruses and to the vaccinations. So I did. And what I came up with, okay, the one that really affected directly this chart, well, actually was a couple. Okay, so just looking at the United States chart before I jump a little bit more, was that Thucydides, I can't even say it, at 20 degrees 56 minutes of Gemini is square the ascendant. Within minutes, it conjuncts the IC, so it's down here. As a matter of fact, it's close to Adamite, which is an asteroid that talks about condensing and confining and restrictions and delays. And so you could see that the delays will be ongoing. And I'm willing to bet that there will be more issues or restrictions, I should say, and we're seeing it already, put on people because of Adamitis being at that point in the chart. And because the pandemic is right beside it, right where I put the M. I know I should have put a THU there, but in any event, it is also, like I say, in direct opposition, and it also by parens is also working with photographers. So you sort of understand that. And that's everything I have written. So I did that. The other factor I really wanted to look at, which is really critical, is about the vaccinations. And in this particular chart, and I'm going to stick with Washington's chart for just a moment longer, the Jenner and Pasteur, which are two vaccination asteroids, are at 2640, that's Jenner, and 2633, Pasteur, both in Cancer. Literally, they are 7 minutes apart, and they happen to fall right here. And Demeter is asking us to take care of ourselves, which could bring about some chaos. Okay. Or it is chaos, which is why we have to take care of ourselves. The other thing I saw here, let me find it, is right here. And here again, by parens, it's involved in all of this. Now, Pallas is trying Pasteur and Jenner. So they are going to have more strategies and planning related to vaccinations. But you can tell that vaccinations are also it. Oh, I'm sorry, I did that wrong. Take that back. Pallas is involved with Adamite. In other words, there's more strategies related to that. Okay. Strategies for Washington, D.C. Just leave it at that. Okay. Because I'm jumped ahead of myself here. Where I want to look for the 26 is right here. It actually conjuncts Mercury. It's actually in opposition to Pluto. So we're talking about that 5th to 11th house dynamic, which I alluded to earlier. So excuse me, I kind of jumped ahead of myself here. It is conjunct Mercury, as I said, so there is a lot having to do with more about the news. It is also trine Pallas, That's what I was really trying to get at. So there is a conjunction to Pallas. It is a trine. And remember, the trines swear to it. So this is actually very positive for our recovery because this trine is plans and strategies are in line with our, and they would be right here, this 26-degree point for Jenner and Pester. Okay? God, I corrected that. Caught it right away. So the other thing that you should look at is this idea of, where did I see it? Of service. Now it tells me, hold on, I got to look at my notes here. There's an opposition from Pluto. Okay, I'm missing something. Basically, oh, here it is, and it's not. It's in conjunct. Right here is what I'm referring to. Okay, so you have Pluto in opposition. Pluto is, the power trips and manipulation and all of that. And it's in opposition to Jenner and Pasteur. And it is also not far from the sun, out of sign, but it's there. And not far from the moon, which we've already discussed. But what does Hebe mean? Well, it's service people. Okay, so they may be, because they're considered frontline, they may be a big concern. But it's also about enabling. What is it that we're enabling by creating power struggles against the vaccination? What is it enabling besides chaos in our abilities to care for ourselves? Or better yet, Washington's chart for Washington to be able to take care of its people. Okay? See, this whole thing is very, very complicated and on a political scale because the big lie, but also Republican Party's been hijacked since the 1980s. And I've talked about that before. And if you're interested in any of that, check out Heather Cox Richardson. She is a historian. She's actually doing podcasts now with Joanne Friedman. And they do a lot of work to educate us. So I highly recommend seeing them. But they do point out that this Republican Party is about sowing chaos and resistance because this particular Republican Party is not in favor of any form of government. As a matter of fact, they're not in favor of democracy either. And I know that sounds really harsh and like, wow, why would you say that? Well, I think that you need only to look at what's going on. And I know this is turning out very political and I don't want it to, but I do want to say that that's a fact. That when you stop trying to get people to vote, when you start going against what you know are good for the people, then you have to ask yourself what it is. And this was something else that came out in the news, that Putin in 2018 bragged about a missile that he could use where nobody could stop it. I don't think he meant a missile. He meant disinformation and how that has sowed what they need to do to destroy our democracy. And anyone going along with it, unfortunately, is playing along with Putin's plan. But then there are those Republicans who would rather be Russian, which means communist or fascist, over democracy. And I think that we need to really look at that. And unfortunately, the people who explain that the best are historians. So apparently it's not our first rodeo. But I know this is turning into a very political, it's probably one of the most political videos I've ever done. But I really am concerned once I looked at this chart of what is going on with our government or our country, because I don't want to say our government, because I do believe that President Biden is doing what he can. I believe that he will be hugely successful. So I don't doubt that we're headed in the right direction. I don't doubt that the good will happen. But it's just very disconcerting how many people are either A, uninformed, B, naive and ignorant, or C, really do not want a democracy after 250 some odd years. It's a thought. Anyway, something to think about. Now, I'm going to get off of this and I'm going to turn this into a dial. So enough of my political crap. So here, I wanted to point out a few things. Remember I talked about Mercury? So I'm doing the Aries point first. And look at this, node Mercury. Not only is this asking us about where we're getting our news and who we're connecting with, but it's also asking us to think about node Mercury, children, young people. And maybe that's where we need to focus some of our attention, young people. Okay. Now I'm going to go through, as I do, I'm going to do first the vaccinations. Okay. I want to point out that Peter, which is a Piet, if I'm saying it correctly, down here at 5 degrees is in aspect 2. So let me get my pen again. Okay. So we could just look at this from, this is not Aries point. This is just me going through the vaccinations, okay? There is a, now remember that around 3 something, this is a vaccination that we haven't talked about yet. This is Francis. I'm going to put the F, okay? But Francis happens to be square within 2.5 degrees, which makes it real, Monroe, which is another, okay, so we've got 2 asteroids. Okay, I'm sorry, that's not Francis. That is, here we go. I should have done this better. That's actually Monroe. That's where Monroe is. Okay, I got ahead of myself again. Okay, let me take that off because I don't want to confuse. So about 3 something, oops, that's Monroe. Actually, we're looking at it. Okay, here it is 3-9 to be exact. No, it's actually over here. That's not what I was looking at. The ones I want to look at is Peter, which is 5. That's what I was doing wrong. Boy, I'm also, for somebody who's done a lot of work on this. Okay, so it's about 5.5. Okay, there it is. Okay, so you can see that it affects the ascendant, descendant. Remember I talked about Adamite. Well, look what it equals, Adamite, which is, again, could this be restrictions coming back? I don't know, you know, I mean, it really does look like, when I look at Peter, which is 5.5 degrees, also squares the, and this is what I was trying to get at, and then I jumped ahead of myself and went crazy. Right here is Francis. That's what I was trying to get at. Okay, so I was wrong. So that's Francis, okay? So you have, within a range, you have a square there. Now, with that said, 2 viruses square each other, okay? So actually, I lied. We have 3 viruses square each other, okay? Possibly, yeah. And then there's some sextiles and ink. So in other words, one of the things I really want to point out is the amount of activity that's going on between these viruses. Okay, so there's 8 viruses. Okay, we only have 3 vaccinations. And that was me just doing my homework. And now it's not to say we have 8 different viruses. No, but we have 8 things that can talk to us about the viruses. All right. And we already saw that with the Washington, D.C. chart. The other thing that came up here that also affects the DC chart is Lao, which is opposite the ascendant, meaning it falls on the descendant at 19 degrees Virgo, 21 minutes, conjuncting that Atlantis and that Apollo that I already spoke about. So hopefully you got that. Like, in other words, that virus is causing the gloom and doom. It's causing the, it's causing a problem. Okay. And there's a square from Laos to Thucydides by about a degree and a half. It's very tight, in other words. But we also have Athena at 1 degrees Aries 6. And remember, I talked about that. So that would be, let me go back. Let me get this back up here. So if I'm back up here at the Aries point, and I'm just going to get it right because it just makes it easy if I leave it there. Okay, so I'm back. And, here, remember that at 2 degrees of Cap, right in here, we have the asteroid, the trans-Neptunian Cupido, and the Pallas is up there. And remember that Pallas is, I believe it was Demeter that it was Demeter that we had seen right off the ascendant. Pallas actually is, if you put these together, they actually form these two strategic asteroids, Pallas and Demeter, actually meet at the Aries point. So there is a lot of strategy and planning when dealing with the public, at least for right now. And the fact that Pallas is right up there and Amor is boundary, particularly with people that are close to us, you kind of have to wonder what the heck is going on. Melpomene, which is, right here. Okay, right here. See all this? These are telling us that, I did want to leave it there because of this, but that's all right. That there's disruptions, interruptions, things did not go the way they thought they were. They've actually gotten worse. Okay? And at 725, we have Stanley. Right there, where I drew that heart, there is an asteroid for a virus again. So you have like all these viruses are culminating on us, okay? And so there's a virus. And that's bringing about, it's worse than we think. It is worse than we think. It is unbelievable how many people do not understand this virus and how that's going to dominate a lot of what's going on in this particular full moon. Really is quite sad. So there's more squares. So I got to go on. So we have a square between Athena, which is like literally right here where Pallas is, where we also have Cupido A. This is masks, believe it or not. This is social distancing. So I do want to say that I think more areas will probably get shut down or restricted, not just the Olympics. I think we're going to see that. Now, at 1 degrees of Aries, but at 2 degrees, 16 minutes is yet another virus. So right on the other side of this, remember, that's where Cupido is. So it's viruses in specific communities. And I also have to point out that Pallas and Demeter are political. Okay, it's just the nature of those asteroids. And it makes me again wonder why this is so political. And what is the value of creating chaos and killing off all your people? I don't get it. So then we go on, and I already pointed out Laowan, they're opposite one another. So every single asteroid that I've talked about is somehow making some kind of connection. There will be some help and there will be some turning point coming in. So, again, some areas are vaccinated really well. I think Pennsylvania's got one shot up to 77%, which is great. I'm not so sure about the area that I live in, but I know the state that I'm in is doing well. So there will be some that will be able to rise above this. And that's at 11.5 degrees and which is about here. I'm sorry, I did it wrong. Which pulls in that haze. And I think that's where I'm at. But again, haze is about deterioration. It's about disease. It is viruses. And Fastora, which is the only one I hadn't talked about, is sitting with haze. Literally in a square. So you can see why I was very concerned looking at this chart and why I who I'm never usually political and don't want to spend a whole lot of time on these viruses, really, really, really felt the need to go through this information on a video because I really, really am so sad, Neptune, um, that people don't think they need to get vaccinated. I don't know how they think it's going to go away. We didn't get rid of smallpox or polio without vaccinations. I don't know what they think is going to happen with this. So I really apologize to anyone who's a little bit offended by all the politics. I try not to do that because I really want to keep this a clean educational site. But this particular chart just really didn't allow me that plus a lot of headlines in the last 24, 48 hours. When you put the two together, there was almost no way I couldn't tread on those waters because it really is becoming an issue for us all. But I do want to take, and I came back, it's just an intermission. I am going to go back in. I do want to look at this, the asteroids, but I had to stick with my, I had to stick with what I was saying about the virus. So I'm going to go back in. I'm going to look at the charts a little bit differently. We're going to go in and look at the Aries point, and we're going to look at the sun axis. Only just a few minutes because I really don't want to spend too much more time on this. And again, I did come back just to apologize because I really didn't want to spend this much time on that one issue. So let's check out the dial. Okay, I have everything set. I'm actually going to look at the sun axis first. And I want to point out that it's running with Volcanus. So you see Volcanus is right here. And I really do feel that that is going to cause us a lot of pressure. And it might be because of pressure that we do a lot of pondering, sort of like what I did when I actually did the first part of this. I just felt so pressured to do that, which is very much in the chart. I also want to look at this over here, which is what it equals. We got a midpoint between Calypso and Eros. Now this could be that there's something that we're really excited about, but maybe we don't know everything. So if you're involved in, you've been beginning something new, you might want to take a moment to really look at it, to really make sure that this is something that you really, that you know enough about. And here again, with Urania right in the middle, okay? So Urania right there in the middle is telling us that the chart itself is, we've got to be logical. You can't be emotional. You can't look at these things emotionally. And I think that that's where, I was trying to, that's a really good message. And I think that that's what I was trying to say in the first part where I was a little bit more political. You have to be logical. You can't be run by emotions. You have to understand that particularly fear is something that people can use against you. And I can tell you that that's what a lot of the disinformation uses, fear. So don't go by how you feel, go by what is logical. That's really going to be important, okay? The other part of the axis, which we're going to take a look at, and then I'll go deeper in this, but right now let's just look at this. So here it's almost 24. Oh, that's only 23. I need to go one more degree, I believe. Yep, that's it. Okay, so yeah, you can see the sun and the moon play in here. Okay, the other angle of the chart, ironically, and this is kind of weird, also reminds you that we don't know everything. That's Sphinx. Sphinx is also reminding us, and not far away is Diana. And I think that what they're trying to say is that you may have to seek out what information you don't have this month. That I believe that, and this is in play here. So I do believe there's a lot of chaos, and that's what that EOS is. A lot of scattered energy, justice. Right now, there's just so much, and I know I've heard this before. in Washington, they're not doing anything. Yeah, they are. I think Garland is just inundated with the amount of stuff he's going to have to go after in this administration. And again, I don't want to stay political. I could really make a comment right here. I'm going to refrain from something that I actually learned in astrology 4 years ago. It is going to take the DOJ a long time to catch up with all this. It was predicted, ironically, and by other astrologers in a group that I work with that is political. And there's so much that the Justice Department has to deal with that it is scattered. And all I'm going to tell you is that we need to be patient, not emotional, logical, because that will win the day, and patient, okay? Because we don't know everything. As a matter of fact, we don't know much at all compared to what we are going to be learning in the next 2 years, especially because of Pluto's return, which I will talk about. The country's Pluto return, that's a whole video and what that means. And if we can rise above some of the South Node, Pluto's second house stuff that this country has already gone through, and their ability to be logical about it, okay? I love Urania. It's one of my favorites. So I'm going to work with just this axis right now. So the points that we're looking at, and this is for those people who are interested in the dial, we're looking at 126 fixed, 2356 fixed, 1628 mutable, which should be right where all this is, I believe. Yeah, so about, 1626 really, and just to be exact. And then the opposite is, because see how that is opposite of where that sun moon midpoint is. Okay, I'm making sure I got this right. Yeah, even a little more. But you can see how they're lining up. Then on the cardinal end, it would be, so we go to almost 24 degrees. I'm getting there. I'm trying to get as low as I can. Okay, so I go a little bit too far. Just a bit. Okay, so it's actually about 56 minutes. So here we're going to be looking at the opposite, which would be 8 degrees, 56 minutes. So what I do, and that's cardinal. So what we're going to do is we're going to take those numbers, and I'm just going to kind of go through this axis with my paper. As a matter of fact, I'm going to come back in rather than doing it on the dial this time, just because I think it'll be easier. So I'm back, and I probably could have done this, but I did want to get the numbers for the axis. So as I'm going to tell you right now, we're going to be doing fixed 1 degree, 26 minutes, fixed 23 degrees, 56 minutes. Cardinal, 8 degrees, 56 minutes. Mutable, 16 degrees, 28 minutes. So that means when you go through each of these lists, we're going to be able to see what falls in the axis of the sun. Okay, and for our first one, we have, we got a couple, which I think is interesting. So the first one we're looking at is Poseidon. Remember, I've talked about Poseidon, and we're going to be talking about it again. It's in the Aries point. Well, this is the asteroid Poseidon, which means very much the same thing. Happens to fall at 8 minutes, 57 seconds. I'm sorry, 8 degrees, 57 seconds. In other words, 1 minute off. That's incredible. And Poseidon is, again, knowledge. It can be enlightenment. It can be education. I am really hoping that this new moon is about learning a lot. There's so much missing information. There's really no end to it. We're going to realize that very soon. It's also talking about risks with money. Okay, so we're going to be learning also about risks with money. And I know that there's a lot of people who are very concerned about the infrastructure deal. Although I'm going to point out something to everybody. It's worth listening to historians for this information. Bill Clinton went after the rich. He did close loopholes. We did have a balanced budget. People always look at me, well, how are they going to get the money? Do you know how many billionaires we have in this country who do not pay taxes? Yeah, that's exactly where we're going to get the money. So it's not about you and me. It's about the one percenters who think for some reason that they can run the show but pay no taxes. It's just amazing. So I'm not worried about the money plunge, but there is a plunge of money. That's what's being discussed. Now, that's for everybody. So in our own personal lives, we may be looking to make, as we become aware, we'll make the plunge. We will make the investment, which I think is absolutely phenomenal. Okay. So I'm going to run down here, and it is talking about, and we talked about this, credibility. Credibility is going to be really important over this new moon period. It's credible. Is the information credible? And also, just are we credible? As the source credible? Are the people credible? And when you look at this, you have to think about, um, or have the burning of bridges, or are people just trying to burn bridges? That's what I mean by who would sow chaos, but yet that's what I see. So we go into the mutable, which is at 16, and I see pressure again. I see pressure, and I want you to know, and this is so funny because I saw this, the map of the viruses appears to be heading west. So look out if you're in the western part of the country. For some reason, that is a factor, okay? The next one we're going to be looking at is how people who are out of control will turn around and be charming. And that means people who drink too much, take drugs, they're just out of control. And in order to keep going, they'll use charm. Okay, so that's more of a personal. I don't know, that could also be political, but I'm not going to get into that. Okay, I could, but won't get into that. So as we move down back into fixed, Anubis is running with the sun, and so is truth. And Anubis is really about dead animals, and so I don't know if there's going to be some truth that comes out about dead animals, or if this is about our own deaths, and truth is right there, sitting with it. So I think it is about ferreting the truth, getting to the truth on everything. Of course, what people are most interested in is really fairness. Because I'll tell you right now, somebody who's vaccinated, and I heard somebody else say this on TV, if you followed all the rules, but yet everything around you is still shutting down, how fair is that to people like us? So it is a fairness issue. And fairness will be an issue regardless if it's the money plunge or if it's finding out the truth. Okay. Yeah, and also how people are kind of stuck. Just like I said, it's unfair. I'm stuck, I don't really care, honestly. We could shut down. I wouldn't care. I'm somebody who's quite happy sitting right here in my office. This is my happy space. Plus, my significant other has property that's on a waterway, and we can kayak. And so none of my life really stops. But how fair is that to people who don't have those things? I'm also older. What if you're young? How fair is that? But you've been vaccinated. Okay. Also, the Olympians who are out after being fully vaccinated. There's just so much on this one. So much to consider. And people do feel like they're being held for ransom. That is the truth. So as we get back into the mutables, I'm looking at lies and how the lies have muddied the water, Sphinx, how lies keep us in the misinformation, keeps the truth from coming out. So we've got both lies and truth in the same axis, but that lies are actually riding with Sphinx, literally only 6 minutes apart. Sphinx being the questions. Okay. So there's lies. There are lies out there that need to be contend with. Okay? So again, how awful is that? The fact that there's so much going on, we already talked about that, is one of the reasons why there's so many issues. And Uh, Again, use logic. It's in there. Ta-da! And the two midpoints there. Oh, besides the Urania, it also refers to Smiley, which is not really in there. It'd only be in there by midpoint. But watch out for those who smile because they're lying a lot of times. Okay, so it means you can't really trust anybody. As we move on, um, just to finish this out, because I am getting a little bit long-winded here. I did talk about Diana and I did talk about seeking out truth. Now it is retrograde, so it's going to be a little bit harder to sort out, okay? But it is there. And then as I go to, here we go, risks. People taking risks. How much of where we are is because people are willing to take risks? I'm not so sure that's a good risk either. But also compassion will play into that. Also, justice is going to make a play, and I did see that in the chart. So justice is going to uh, play into this, even though it's retrograde. So again, it won't be complete, but it will be making a showing. And the very final, we've already discussed, is the fact that there's a lot of information that's missing. Okay, so that talks about the sun axis. As far as the Aries point axis goes, there's not as much, but it does tell us, Hecate, to listen to our inner voice, particularly when we are in unfamiliar surroundings. And that means use your head. Okay. And be aware when you're around different associations and different people. Okay. In other words, know your environment and know the people in it would be a good way to look at this. Again, it tells us to have good boundaries, okay, especially with the people we love, and always listen to our gut. But it also means not only listen to intuition, but pay attention to the foods you're eating, okay, because that's also in there. The It talks about how things are getting out of control. And as a result of that, things are not going to end up being what we expect. And I think that's very much a part of this chart, just exactly as I said it. It talks about how there's a lot of crap out there and how going back to wearing masks could be painful, which, it just depends on who you are. But it does also talk about, again, news that we're going to be hearing that hits the mark, and how we just need to learn more. That's like really important. And it also points to the fact that depending on other people, depending on who we're listening to, who are you depending on for your news? Look at that. It also refers to how things are getting worse and we should brace ourselves for a fall. Now, that can be on a personal level, but that can also be in what we're going to be hearing in the world, okay? Because that's world. I'm now in the Aries point. I'm done with the sun axis. I've moved on to the Aries point. We are going to be saying to ourselves, why God me? We are going to say that. We're also going to know that this is the beginning of something related to an illness that we are still dealing with. So there's more beginnings related to this illness that I don't think that are going to go all that well. I think that people, in spite of everything, it will be a productive time. I think that we will be able to use that truth wisely. And I also feel that partners and partnerships right now, and this might have to do with a lot of things that are going on, but I really feel that there can be oppressive, and worldwide, that can be oppressive. Remember, this is the Aries point. It also, again, talks about people who might be humiliated, and it could also be related to self-destructive tendencies. It also talks about how a lot of things will happen in the evening, and it talks about service people, so tip your service people well. But also it really is related to the fact that people are enabling other people. And we have to think about what that means, because enabling anyone is not ever a good thing for both parties. Okay. It talks about um, this idea that there's real serious matters going on and we're still dealing with like old memories, and how this is really karmic, fated type feeling, very testing. We're being very tested right now, but it is about us changing, and it's very serious, and we got to pay attention to it. So I hope that helps. This is a long one, a little longer than I like, but I hope it was informational. Again, I apologize for the politics. I really don't want to make my channel political, even though I am. I guess that's the best way to put it. But what I do want to leave you with today is please take care. Please be well. And think about your neighbors, whether you're vaccinated or not. Okay? And with that said, thank you for watching this video. Again, please like, share, comment. And most importantly, until we meet again, I wish you only happy readings.